Dobry wieczór. I'm Todd Lefkoe, chairperson of the international nonprofit East Connections and the president of the private corporation United Filtration Company. Marketing is a key component of success, both for organizations and for individuals. If others know our products and brands or ourselves and think highly of the qualities and benefits, half of our work is accomplished. Marketing is officially the activities a group takes to promote the buying or selling of a product or service. This includes advertising, selling, and delivering products to others. It defines the business opportunity, potential customers or partners, and the products or services to meet their needs. Build relationships, driving the demand, and communicates corporate or product services and value. It defines what if others know you and what they think of you. Today, we're fortunate to have Michelle Massey, one of the best marketers, event planners, advertisers, and relationship designers I know. She's a marketing executive, an outstanding actress, a top-level jazz singer, but most of all, she's a good person. Michelle Massey serves as the Director of Public Programs and Marketing for the Museum of Russian Art in Minneapolis. In her role, Michelle is responsible for devising and executing programs across various artistic disciplines, including visual arts, music, theater, dance, and literature. Leveraging her strong connections in the creative community and a history of successful collaboration, Michelle crafts innovative programs that not only service the museum's mission, but also engage the local community by increasing awareness and appreciation of the arts. She has a bachelor's degree in music and theater from Gustavus Adolphus College and a two-decade career as a professional performer, singer, and actress, and international entertainment producer. It is my great pleasure to introduce Michelle Massey. Michelle?
Hello, everyone. Hello. It is such a pleasure. It is my honor to be with all of you. I want to thank the American Center in Massey for bringing this particular area, and I've grown into this career through somewhat of a non-traditional path. So I'm hoping that the things that we talk about, the methods that I've used, the strategies that I use at the museum, which I've learned over time, but with a non-linear career path, marketing yourselves, you're aspirationally thinking about institutions or companies or people that you want to work with, or even the things that you're doing now. So I'm excited for this. Todd, should we start with talking about the museum so that everybody can get
the museum so they get a concept, because it's such a brilliant institution.
Yes. So the Museum of Russia supported nonprofit museum in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is a photo of the exterior. Look at how brilliant it looks in the evening. This picture was actually taken during the pandemic. So it was a very quiet street at the time. I think it illustrates some really interesting points about the museum, which was originally a church in South Minneapolis. You look at this architecture. This is Spanish mission style. It has nothing to do with the environment that it's in. It was built in this style to attract a pastor that was going to be at this church back in the 1930s. So it's an old building that was remodeled by our founders. The museum was founded in 2002. The founders remodeled this to become the museum and changed to this location in 2005. So this is what it looks like in the heart of the United States. Let's go to the next slide so I can show you what it looks like on the inside. And I think this really makes my job so inspirational and easy. This is what the galleries look like right now. So these are the exhibitions on view. And I realize you can't see the artworks up close right now, but this is just to give you a perspective on how the building was opened up. You see that this, from the top level on the left-hand side, that's from the top level of the museum overlooking the main gallery. What a great vantage point to be able to look at artwork. It feels like a sacred space, even though it's a very secular space. You'll go over to the right, you'll see a view from the main gallery, and then down one, that is actually the lower level gallery. So that would have been the church basement. You'll notice their lower ceiling. You'll see works from our permanent collection there. And I want you to remember that painting on the left. You can't see it in full scale right now, but this is an important part of our marketing, this painting, which is called Milkmaid's Novella. So we'll go to the next slide. I just want to show you how the galleries change aesthetic, change personality over time. You'll see anything from paintings to, if you look down in the lower left, that's an exhibition on cosmism by an amazing artist named Andrea Stanislav. So in the apse, in the archway, you can hardly see it, there was a large glitter-covered horse on a mirrored platform circulating in a circle. It was brilliant. It was a very Beyonce moment. So then you see paintings over to the right there, and then above on the upper right, you'll see our 20th anniversary, which you can't really see object or any specific works in this view because each alcove was used as a mini exhibition for different areas of our collection. This is a huge part of who the museum is and a huge part of our marketing. Our gift shop is renowned. It's up on the second level of the museum, and it's a gallery in and of itself. So this is the viewpoint when you walk in and you first take in this beautiful place that plays music. You see all this natural light. The directors of this shop do a great job in curating a beautiful selection of artisan work. It's fantastic. So you'll see that we are also online, a really important part of what we do, shoptomora.org. And I should mention that the museum's website is different from this one. It can be found at TMORA.org. So if you're looking to learn more about us. Now, I want to show you this because this is a key part of what I use to make the museum known. This is a key strategy for the museum, which is events. And so I want to give you a little indication of what our space looks like with people doing all kinds of things. So up on the upper left, you'll see one of the dancers from the Moscow Ballet teaching a bunch of children the trepak. So the Nutcracker comes here every year, and they have a wonderful program that has been, so it's free for a bunch of kids to come and learn dances and meet the ballerinas, and it's great. If you go over to the right, that is a champagne and caviar tasting, a partnership that I was so excited to do with a really well-known partner that does great education and high-level wine events. So, I mean, this was upwards of $200 a person. Look how many people were willing to come drink champagne and eat caviar. One down, another key part of our events is classical music. So this particular photo is Sasha Kosman, who was part of NPR's Performance Today. So this was a live broadcast. She played a beautiful program of Midner, and it was fantastic. And then the next photo, we actually have a folk group that is associated with TMORA. This is a big part of our outreach, right? So these women, led by our curator and others, actually study ancient female communal culture pre-Soviet. So this is really interesting for education, and they do programs at the museum. And then just a couple more. So on the left-hand side, this is a recent partnership with Minnesota Fashion Week. So as we talk about strategies and expanding audiences, this is part of my initiative to bring in the young people, bring in the influencers. And so we were a partner of Minnesota Fashion Week to do their finale show at the Museum of Russian Art. I got to tell you, I think over 300 people, including models and designers, many of whom had not been to the museum before. Can you imagine how much social media came from this crowd? It was absolutely fantastic. And then over on the right, again, a huge tenet of our event strategy is classical music. And you see the gentleman you can see with his back to us. I should have given a better picture of him, Denis Stuhian, who is my partner as a curator of classical music, an amazing pianist who does programs and helps me curate the best of the best. We're currently in 150 years of Sergei Rachmaninoff. We've done 6 concerts, I think, this year. We have, I think, 4 more coming up, and we've sold out all of them. We bring in the best Steinways. So this is a little taste of what we do as well. A couple more projects that I just want to brag about and show you how wonderful the space is for doing interesting and dynamic theatrical presentations. This is a partnership with Sandbox Theater. They developed this particular aerial play around Russian folklore. So this particular piece is about Baba Yaga, and you can see that Baba Yaga is actually suspended from the ceiling. It was a fascinating play, and it had music. You can see the musicians are down there. We sold out 8 shows. Again, another new audience in a dynamic way to be in the space and learn about the art and folklore of Russia. I love this project as well. This is recent. You will see how the gallery was transformed into a house for an opera. So a company staged Eugene Onegin. This particular company does accessible shows that are actually done in English. So this program was abbreviated, done in English. You know, you can feel however you want about that. I like the original Russian, but there's definitely an audience who could maybe get a gateway into this particular opera, and it was immersive. So you were literally sitting right next to the Russian into the museum. So what do you think, Todd?
I thought it was great. You know, for those of you in Moscow or in Russia, NPR is Minnesota Public Radio.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that Michelle does,
Mm-hmm.
how do you get it so you use social media or radio or the newspapers, you know, to basically do that? And she's been an expert at, you know, at that, because quite frankly, you know, a couple hundred may show up at the museum, but a couple thousand may see the results. You
That's
know,
right.
it's the question, magnifying your audiences. First question I've got is, besides a sense of, what skills does a good marketer need?
That's a great question. So I want to, as you saw everything that we're doing, I want to tell you that the museum is a small institution as far as the budget. And I mean, we have a $1.3 million budget, which is not tiny. But when you talk about staff size, there are fewer than 10 of us on staff. So I want to just relay to you that the efforts that are done, you see all those people in the galleries, I am the only marketing person. And obviously I rely heavily on my colleagues. You know, how do we bring a couple hundred people in with the help of volunteers and our staff? But we have to be very strategic. So I think a good marketer needs to prioritize. In my case, I have to be scrappy, and that's an American word. That's like sort of being really resourceful with what you have. And I'm somewhat frugal as well. So you've got to be able to prioritize. I think that being impassioned about what you're marketing is really helpful, and to be, you know, how you can be excited to find different ways to access your audiences, to transform them in ways to get them. Not everybody understands, why would you come to the Museum of Russian Art in America? This is, you know, I love to give people the why. I love to get, this is why you should come. And also I think patience is a really good thing. And I think looking and measuring and paying attention to everyone, being graceful as you know, take care of social media and respond, to know that you're listening to your audiences and being perceptive in that way. So those are a few things that have worked for me.
You know, you've got basically an audience of people in Minnesota and another 10 or 15 million people around, you know, in the states around us. And with social media, we're worldwide, you know, in terms of all activities. With all of these different audiences, how do you develop a strategy for each audience, and for the ones that you think are the ones that are most likely to, you know, to attend? How do you identify who your audiences are?
I think of it in sort of like years. So the core audience of Minnesotans, the people that are regularly coming to visit, our membership, which is about 1,300 people, you know, so Minnesota, those people that are actually in the galleries, we want to make sure we're taking care of them using a strategy that is, you know, maybe if we're talking about geofencing, and when we use digital marketing to reach those people specifically, right? And then we can plan things that we know that Minnesotans will go to, right? I think about classical music, I think about daytime programming, etc. Then you look outward. How is the nation viewing if they go to the website, right? So what can they see digitally? They can access our virtual programs that we've done in the past. They can see into the galleries through social media. And then, of course, you go internationally and you look at sort of what the museum is doing as a mission, and how is that interesting to me as someone in Russia, as someone in Europe, as someone in South America, etc., because it's all visible.
You know, you've got you've got messages on different levels.
Mm-hmm.
One is the idea of for the museum. Secondly is the idea of specific programs.
Yeah.
How do you basically decide what your central message is and then adapt that to each audience?
It's not always easy. I think with a nonprofit, which is a nonprofit organization in America is defined by where your revenue goes. So the revenue goes back into the organization. So any money that we make does not get dispersed among people that run the museum or its members. So we're thinking about how to get the mission out to the broader space, right? So we're thinking about what does the mission mean and what kinds of conversations are we having to? I always try to go back to the artwork. And so I always, like when I question, I go to my curator, Dr. Masha Zavialova. She is absolutely incredible and an expert across the board. So we go back to, like, we have an icon show, that's something that people across the world can relate to. If I show you a picture of a beautiful icon, it causes a reaction. I have to tell you, we have a Twitter account. I can't say that it's a huge Twitter account, but every time I post something on Twitter, like a picture, who the first organization is to like that is Sarsko Selo. And I just find that to be an amazing connection that I've been there. We're keeping an eye on each other. We're sharing culture, which is important.
On this, some programs go better than others.
That's true.
There are some that we wished we had known before what was going to happen. If a program goes poorly and either there's a technical or it just was an illogical process, what do you do?
Are you assuming that I make mistakes, Todd? No, it happens.
Listen, all of us have done things that we wished in foresight were brilliant.
Right.
In terms of, and backward. But what happens is that sometimes the audience doesn't show up or
that's true.
It's a technical factor. What do you do? How do you, it's the question of crisis control.
I haven't had many crises, I would say. I mean, certainly challenges of how people may perceive an American Museum of Russian Art. I would not say that's a crisis. It's just dealing with the general big world of social media, right? I will say, I'll give a little personal story about a time that I was so proud. I created this Nutcracker program for children and families. And I had some good friends, being that I am in the performance world. I had these colleagues that created a show, and it was not cheap. So I had a sponsor and he supported it. We had a big house, and I charged, I feel like the children were at one rate, but I was at maybe $20 for an adult. That's a ticket to a show, right? That's not small. And so when the show happened, it was 20 minutes long, and then they were done. And I was panicking. And so I went to the director. I said, we can't be done now. Look at all these people. I would have never charged that much. So there was something that got lost in translation about what everything was. So they ended up teaching a little dance class to all the kids and then ended up extending the program. Now, did it extend into the hour and 15 minutes that I would have wanted that program to be? No, it didn't. And so when anyone came to me and said, that is not what I was expected, I had maybe 3 different calls like that. I admitted and I said, yes, it was actually my mistake. And I apologize for that. I'm happy to refund you. And thank you for being there. I hope you enjoyed the little bit that you saw and just owned up to it, learned my lesson. I did cry in the gallery that night, but I think that was a big lesson for me to know that I have a lot on my shoulders and just take one thing at a time and just understand that you will make mistakes. It's just a fact, and move on from that.
One of the skills, though, is adaptability.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's the ability to adapt quickly, to change. What change has come with the development of social media in the last couple of years in terms of how you market and what you spend your time with?
I'm always working to be better on time management, but I learned a lot through watching others work. So because I'm a lone person that did not go to school for marketing, I, have a background in promoting myself, the shows that I'm talking. I'm totally losing track of what the question was, Todd. Remind me.
No, the question is basically, this idea of social media
Oh
and
yeah.
how does social media, the change
Mhm.
in the last couple of years, affect what you do? Because in terms of access and in terms of timing and technical skills that most of us aren't
Yeah.
trained on.
Thank you for reminding me. I think one of the things that I learned about is that it's good to always focus on repetition with social media to capture different angles of artwork, how to be in this space and work more on reels, messaging that way, and to dynamic with it and creative. And I do take a lot of inspiration from what younger people are doing with it.
Yeah.
I learn a lot. Aspirationally, I would love to be on TikTok and whatnot. And that's a goal for me to work with other social media. But particularly Instagram is a really fertile ground for me, and work on stories and providing probably pretty basic, but incorporating reels and stories has been really helpful for me. I know that with Facebook, I have a little bit different audience, right? So remember that painting that we saw? If I post that painting, which is kind of a flagship painting, it represents a lot of what people love about the sort of old school, original fans of the museum from 20 years ago. If I put those milkmaids on any social media, it draws instant engagement as sort of a favorite painting. So I kind of spice up those older images and then add information about, again, giving them the why. If they don't know the history of Russia, specific about the artwork, how can I entice them about a certain story of an artist, about the background of a performer,
Yeah.
where they were born, etc.
I keep thinking of somebody who's juggling 10 balls in the air. You're standing there, and I started making a list of gift store sales, arts programming, exhibitions, sponsoring trips, webinars, musical presentation, and book discussions, and I probably left out 200 or 300 things. How do you balance to be central, whether it's gift store or trips or everything's important? How do you balance all that?
I think that I have the fuel of ongoing passion, right? So I've been here for 7 years, and I did not know as much about the history and the art and culture of Russia at that time. What I did have was the passion of understanding. I'm trained as a classical opera singer, and very involved and love the classical arts. So I made that connection very soon. So, as soon as I got here, and that's what I was charged to do, is bring these classical arts into this space. I was like, this is a dream come true for me. So that fuels me. I think that I have to be very conservative and prioritize, because there are a million ideas that I could do. So I try to be very, intentional with what I choose to do, because there's only one of me.
Yeah.
And overall, look at this sort of overall wash of what we are accomplishing. And collaborations are so helpful. So Todd, you and I do programs together, which means that if East West Connections is putting together an amazing panel, an online program, then I get to help promote that, and that becomes a part of the museum as well. So that's a big part.
When you've got a vibrant organization, there are no average days. But I'm going to ask you a question that there's no good answer for. What does an average day look like for a person that's juggling so many balls together?
Well, I'm a single parent, so I drop off my daughter at school. And I often work from home right early in the morning and get all my emails answered from home, so that I start with a clean slate. So I make a big list of what I'm accomplishing. When I get to the museum, I am often spending time in the galleries, chatting, if, keeping an eye on if there are tours or things like that are happening operationally speaking, because I will tell you, oftentimes people will stop in, will call, they'll need something at the front desk. I'm printing things, I'm making sure the museum, and we all oversee this, but I tend to be the person to get a lot of phone calls. And honestly, it could be a phone call about the bathroom's faucet not working, or somebody has a question about a donation and they can't find the curator or something like that. So there's operational, and then I always have meetings, whether there's Zoom meetings or people coming in to look at the museum. And then we have a very open door policy here. So I spend a lot of time, popping into Masha's office, and we have a sort of tradition here that we talk about everything that we're doing and developing over tea. And so we just sometimes sit in the kitchen. If I need to get away from my computer, and Masha and Mary, any of the other of my colleagues, and we sit down, and it's really brilliant. We speak in this collaborative sense of not only what Masha's thinking about curatorially, what's coming up, but how do I think about that? How could we talk about this in the public? How could we market it? What happens in the shop? What happens, how long will it take to install this? When do we have to be closed? So we spend a lot of time together, and, hopefully we have donuts today. So it's a great day. So I try to get out in the galleries every day, though, to take photos and just read labels and, continue to educate myself on what's in the galleries. It helps me be able to talk about it too.
So the secret is making sure there's chai every day, tea. That's the basic.
Yeah, many of our colleagues will come in for a meeting, and especially my Russian American friends will come, and Masha will make tea, and we'll do it. It's proper, and everyone loves it. That's just what we do.
The general audience that everybody is seeking are students and young people. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems that's happening organizationally across most organizations is they're aging.
Yeah.
How do you basically bring young people and students into the work, of the programming of the museum?
Well, we're lucky that we received a grant not that long ago to include an education coordinator on our staff. So that's a huge thing. So we had someone in place, and we're actually in between that person, and they left to go to a bigger institution, and a new person joining us in September. So you're automatically looking at developing and broadening the scope of the kinds of tours and the kinds of field trips, going out into the schools and speaking to the schools. Not every school can afford to do a field trip to the museum, but what if our wonderful teacher or any of us could go to a school to talk to the kids, read a book to them, etc. Mm-hmm. We have free story times that started with this grant, where kids were getting a book with their story or with their whole event. All of the parents and guardians got in free. So it's this real effort to bring families in, right? So we teach them museum literacy so that we can start them young, so they'll come back, right? Otherwise, students, and we do this with high school students too, honestly. So we want to build a culture of them understanding this history and the artwork. There's the student rate, which makes it really accessible. We also work with other accessibility programs like Museums for All that give free access to folks that are on some sort of assistance programs in the United States. And then we have also added a free Thursday night once a month, which I don't think is just about youth, but it is about offering more access to more people. And so hopefully if they're bringing their kids, I also have to say, it's funny, we have gallery hunts at the front desk, and they're made for kids. More adults will come in and look for all the details, and then they get a sticker at the end. So how can we be an institution when you're talking about maybe art and history that they may not be familiar with? How can we entice them that this is actually, there's so much to learn, there's so much to do. Bring your family, keep coming back.
How do you judge program success? Is it numbers? Is it the fact of how much money, the numbers online, the ability to raise support? How do you figure out what was successful? What's your definition?
I mean, money is good. So it's good to have. It's not the only thing though. So if I can make a program happen that has a sort of like it pays for itself, and then we make some beyond. But let's use, say, classical music for an example. So I can fit in this current and what I'm using for an audience layout. And by the way, we move the artwork and set up those chairs. We bring a Steinway in every time for a concert. So a Steinway will cost a certain amount, over $1,000. The artist or artists will cost a certain amount. And then the ticket sales are actually quite reasonable. So I like to keep them reasonable at $25 for members. This is by and large below what you would pay to see them at an orchestra hall or another venue that specializes in classical music. Very comfortable. I kind of just want to make this sort of like the go-to place that is of value, right? I feel like it aligns, and we sell out all the time. So I'm making a profit even with all of those overhead costs. But where's the key? Obviously the shop is open beforehand. We open it an hour beforehand. We have it open now during intermission and afterwards. If we sell, like our last concert, another $1,200, right? So these are good numbers. These are not thousands and thousands of dollars. But then you look at the overall impact of having, the go-to, the best of the best classical music. Everyone refers to it as the gem. Like this is the place that I go. That proves the overall brand, right? So there's a level of engagement. Now with the story time, that's a free program, right? But if we have 25 kids every single time, well, that looks successful to me. Then are we improving by having more, we measure how many more school kids are coming. We measure overall attendance. There's a lot to look at. So
How do you get ideas?
Bar in my office, Todd. No, I honestly, I show the next thing. And I think this leads into personal relationships. I am a very collaborative kind of person. So when I head into Masha's office or our director, Mark's office, or our director of retail, Mary, or any one of my colleagues, we sit and we just talk about beginning inspiration becomes something that is doable at the museum, or we sponsor a program out in the community, or we bring an exhibition out in the community, or we bring an artist, etc. So collaborative within, and I watch social media and I go to a lot of museums when I can. And I'm always kind of thinking, how could I make something like this happen? I went to a friend's with the museum, but just was beautiful and with precursor to a showing of Amelie. It was like, this is the most perfect curated. I think that bringing a new audience to listen to a group in the space that is the museum could just bring a different kind of engagement. So it's just always a part of things.
But you have a personality that is collaborative and basically builds personal relationships, which is a key element, in terms of skills. How do you teach somebody to figure out what personal relationships mean, and how do they get them? Because that's essential to being successful.
The way I was taught was my father always told me, never burn a bridge behind you, meaning, leave relationships better than you found them. So even if something doesn't work out, even if a program doesn't work out, even if we struggled through something, do your best to have your boundaries, make amends, and build on. But having that sort of my dad's advice made me always think about, the fact that I can call on my colleagues from 20 years ago when I worked at an advertising agency, and I can, go out and talk to other folks about, hey, what would you do in this situation? Or what did you think about this? Or, hey, do you want to do a vodka tasting at the Museum of Russian Art? You do? Okay. So I think personal relationships are the fuel for everything that I do. And I just happen to be the kind of person who enjoys socializing and connecting. Not everybody is like that, but if you can at least be kind, be willing to do whatever you can to support your colleagues, I think that'll go a long way.
You've learned an incredible amount over the years, not just the museum, but the the background that you had. Um, what do you wish you knew now, knew then that you know now, that have become essential? Because after a while, patterns develop that you just know what will work and what won't. But you didn't know that a lot of those things when you began.
Mm-hmm.
What do you wish you had known then?
I often say to myself, I wish I would have known that it's okay to start at the beginning. And
Yeah,
that means when I was graduated from college, I had this sort of idea of the perfect job that I would be looking for. And I mean, it was something different than where I'm at, right? But, and that was 25 years ago. So, um, don't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? Start at the beginning. When I started at the museum, I was a part-time event coordinator. And the director at the time was very specific in how he wanted to do things. So I did his vision, and that was okay. That was what I signed up for. And then I kept going and I kept learning and I kept studying what I was involved in, right? So I would get deep into, understanding the art and culture from a really personal perspective. I'm now learning Russian. I've been to Russia. I didn't know any of these things when I started, but it's okay to start at the beginning and then build from there.
it's you come at this from a different standpoint that a lot of people that come out of PR and
Yeah.
marketing. And you've been a professional performer, a singer and an actress. How do you think that relates to what you're doing?
I don't live in a body of someone who went to college for marketing. So, and working in an agency or whatnot. I have worked in an agency some years ago. I would say that, okay, so I went to college to get this performance degree, start building that career. I ended up at an agency and I learned a lot from there. What I took away from that is that if I really wanted to make it as a performer, I really needed to have a brand for myself. Now, at that time, it really was not about social media. Dare I say it didn't really exist at that time when I was doing it. So again, it was about creating good work. It was about finding a hook. It was about finding how the stakes were high when I was promoting shows. I could not afford to present shows that would not sell out or do really well. So I was always thinking about the little bits of inspiration to get people to buy a ticket to my show or to my thing, right? What the titles, the images, the things that would draw them in. I'm always thinking about presenting things that I know I can sell. And I do that at the museum all the time. And I look at, the artworks and think it's not necessarily about selling the idea, but it is about enrolling. Like I look at a particular icon and I think, oh my gosh, wouldn't everyone love to see this glittery, cover on this icon? This would make a beautiful wouldn't you want to see that in person? I just tend to think about things in promotional and relational ways.
The what's the difference? You raise a really central point. What's the difference between marketing for an organization and marketing for yourself? We sometimes forget that we want people in our groups to basically admire us. And that is a form of marketing of how other people think about us and see us as a leader or a contributor or high quality or something like that. Everybody needs to do that. And that is marketing, which is often difficult because if you do it to a certain extent, they think that you're bragging. And
Sure.
we're taught not to brag. And yet, especially in Minnesota, we're taught to be modest, even though.
Yeah, that's not across the board, though. If you look at influencers, that is not a thing, right?
How do if somebody's developing in effect a marketing plan for themselves as opposed to being for an organization, how would you go about that? Because all of us have had to face that issue in terms of our careers.
Yeah, and I think this is where I tend to take a non-traditional approach, right? Because, I'm sure I have friends that maybe even watching right now that could write a presentation of your entire marketing strategy and think about, the messaging. And I've helped with the branding of restaurants when I worked in the restaurant industry as well, as far as what the feel is and what the the sort of mission and the idea of the name and all of the things that go into a brand. Maybe it's because I think about an organization similar to a person.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I do think about the museum as a living, breathing place, because there's so many people take away different things from a cultural institution. Different people participate differently. So I'm like, how can I let you know that I can be all things to all different kinds of people as a
You know what? If you had your druthers and you were the princess of the world, and would you want in your job? Obviously money's good, but but what are the resources to because you're limited by the factor of time. I mean,
Yes,
there are only 24 hours in a day.
that's right.
And even though we've tried to clone you, it hasn't been successful. And so what other resources do you think, if you had your druther list of what you want, what
Mhm.
what would you have? And I should mention too, if you have questions, please send them in.
Oh, yes, we'll be happy to
I
answer.
forgot to mention that. Send them in, to Tessa or to Zlata, and they'll pass them on. But,
Yes.
but what other resources?
I have to think in the world of aspirations and goal setting as well. So it's just part of the work that I do and the conversations I have with my director. So if I had my druthers, as you said, I would have more people on my team. And I would think about in terms of, say, social media expert that we could work together so that the content is dynamic and consistent. I think that would be amazing, right? I've certainly had interns over the time, but I'm interested in a more long-term relationship because the voice, the the specific knowledge needed for this particular thing is not, it's not common, I don't think. Although there are plenty of people out here who would be able to do it. Um, I would also look at using third parties more often for strategy, for design. There's some very wonderful friends of mine who were talking about aspirationally looking into a digital campaign for the holiday season. So I don't normally do big media buys, but if I'm talking about putting a specific amount of money into a digital campaign, I'd like it to be something where I can really measure its return. And I think the holiday exhibition, which will be the biggest, the one that we've ever done, and then the shop, and then the events that go with it, I think, and I got this advice from my friends, So again, using third parties to really amp up what we're doing. So it's really what it comes down to is for me to have more resources so that I can have more people executing the things that I want to do, or that we
You-
all want to do here.
You've changed the job.
Mhm.
How has the job changed you?
Oh, well, like I said, I came here without the knowledge of what I was dealing with. I was here to execute a job and make, fun, fabulous things happen at the museum. I have to tell you, I have been moved, and I don't say this lightly. All of my colleagues that I've met, a number of that, if you don't know, the Twin Cities is a large population of Russian-speaking people, and I have made so many friends in the community that I didn't know before. And so, like I said, I was able to go to Russia in 2018. I am now learning Russian, and so it changed me. I thought my life was going a certain way, and I still perform, I still sing, and I'm still happy to do that. But this gives me all of that good feeling that I had from my performance career, because I really feel like I have an important mission to share this art and culture with a broader audience. I find great value that I ended up here, and I have no plans on leaving. So
How, when you think about, sometimes jobs become repetitive.
mhm.
You're doing the same things, or they become automatic. Most of us that are doing things like this, it's the new things or the creativity, which was really fun.
Mhm.
you know, um, eh, are there certain areas now in terms of the direction, both of the museum and the kinds of strategies that you use, that based upon what you've learned, that you'd want to do for the next, this is my next 5 years, that I want to carry out, that to be my stamp, to be me.
Well, I feel fortunate. I don't, again, we're trained not to brag here, but I do feel fortunate when I was in the room for the Vysotsky-Dylan
Yeah.
project that we all did together, bringing artists from all over together that was an amazing mission and a beautiful concert. And hopefully we'll be able to share more of that as we are coming up in these
Yes.
next couple of weeks. So I think about that as an example. Now, have I done a number of beautiful concerts in the museum? Yes. Will I ever tire of it? I don't think so. Again, a whole year of Rachmaninoff, and I am not tired, and our audience isn't either. So, so that's the performative stuff. Every time that I'm in a conversation with Masha about what artworks are coming next, what exhibitions we're doing, I am thrilled to think of ways to make things happen. Now, the sort of in the dirt kind of work that I have to do, like setting up tea and cookies, happy to share that duty. I love providing it, but it's a lot. Yeah, the nuts and bolts of an event, I would be happy to share. But as far as being inspired to find transformational activities and ways for people to learn about the museum, I'm not stopping anytime soon.
What do you do when you come up with an idea and you think it's brilliant, but nobody else at the museum has the same passion or understanding of what you're to do? How, because some ideas are more attractive than others.
Yeah.
What do you do at that point? Do you drop it, or do you try and approach it from a different way, or what do you do?
I try to adapt colleagues in there. I will say, looking at those big theatrical presentations that we did, the aerial show and the opera. So what we're talking about is loading in a company for multiple weeks that has to strike, meaning they have to take down that performance every single night so that we can be open as a museum. This is not easy. So I find places all over the museum to hide lighting, trees, and costumes, and it means we're sharing our space. And I know that how long are these people here? And then, it's a lot to share, but I think over time they trust that we'll keep it contained and that this really benefits. And those same colleagues are the ones that, go to the performance and just feel like, oh my gosh, it was totally worth it. Yes. Some things take more work on our end, but hopefully they'll be worth it in the end.
This is a weird question. For the person I consider the best museum director in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
We've had the experience of the museum of having some people that were not as warm and fuzzy.
Sure.
That have been difficult.
Mm-hmm.
How does that change? We all know who we're talking about. How does that change what you do? How do you work in an unpleasant, as a person, what do you do?
That's a tough question, because if people don't quit jobs, they quit managers, right? So in an unpleasant situation or unheard, or, that can be really difficult. And frankly, there were times where I was trying to leave during that time. And we're talking about early on in my tenure here.
Sure.
I have to tell you, Masha, again, our curator, who is a close friend of mine, she kept reminding me, like, we should be the ones that should stay. We are the ones that love this museum. And so we did our best to make it through. And I'm so glad. I think it just worked out that I didn't find the position that I wanted to be in to leave. And then, as you said, it makes all the difference in the world when you are supported by your boss, who is, I have to say, so Mark Meister is the name of the director, and he's a visionary, and he's very patient and kind. And we often call him a Jedi. It's sort of like, I'll just go into his office and say, okay, I'm thinking about this thing. I'm thinking about it. And he knows me. He knows my tendency is to process by overthinking. So I often, what if this happens? What if this happens? I want the guest experience to always be wonderful at every event and in the museum in general. So I often think, what if there's too many people for the number of bathrooms we have? And do we need security? And he'll just look and just say the most simple and perfect thing. And then in addition to that, he is very supportive of letting us work. He trusts us to do our work. He encourages us to do our work. So he's like the biggest cheerleader, but he doesn't do it in a micro. Oh, I'm so excited about this. So yeah, it makes all the
It's
difference.
funny. We develop this psychological pattern of a filter.
Mhm.
And an idea comes in, and all of a sudden, in 10 seconds, it runs so quickly in terms of cost and in terms of
Sure.
performance ability and technology and things like that,
Hmm.
that it becomes automatic in our mind.
Yes.
And it's kind of funny because everybody else has a different filter,
Hmm.
and they basically process information in a different way than we do. And often when you're doing something that are dealing with ideas like you and I do, trying to explain that to other people is really frustrating because it's so clear in our minds about,
Yeah.
and it's this sense about, and some of this, if you're young and in an organization, how do you build trust in others that they're not sure that the idea is solid, but they have enough faith in you that they're gonna trust you.
Oh, I think one thing is to be reliable and be curious. So if
Mhm.
you're, I know that the young people that I have worked with in the past, the most memorable and impactful have been those who have been incredibly reliable. Maybe even what's the word? Like the ones that have sent me a number of emails to do something. Like an intern, I remember very well a particular intern from Yale who, and because it's just a few of us, sometimes we get a lot of inquiries, and if we don't get back to you right away, this particular woman emailed us 4 different times, and I was like, Masha, we need to talk to her. Like, she seems really fantastic. And she was and is, and she came and was an intern, and she, we have a lot of interns, but she was very thoughtful, very reliable, on time, and listened, and then also was willing to share her ideas, and she was okay if they weren't accepted, but it was this sort of youthful curiosity, but also being able to be part of the team. And that's a careful balance. And once you gain the trust of being a person that you want to listen to in a small institution like this, interns often have a big hand in, say, installations. If you're here and you want to work with us until 1 a.m. and you're
Yeah.
curious and knowledgeable and fun, you're going to get a lot of responsibility.
You're seeing a lot of colleges cut back on liberal arts,
Hmm.
and we're in the business of culture,
Yeah.
and trying to do the idea of broader questions and philosophy and the idea of meaning and things like that. Um, how do we basically, the museum is a channel for teaching culture.
Hmm.
How do you basically spread that idea in a society that doesn't seem to appreciate culture sometimes?
I think it's a constant battle for all of us, but I would argue that that constantly being out there as, look, we provide value. Look at the people. Look at how they're learning. Look at what we have to offer you. Look at what we have. I have a liberal arts education, and it taught me more than just learning to be a singer, right? It taught me how to be a critical thinker. It taught me how to be a well-rounded person. It taught me how to be a good citizen, etc. Wasn't always tangible financially right away. I
Yeah.
had to work really hard for it, and I had to work multiple jobs in order to make the things happen that I wanted to. But I feel like a liberal arts education is really important for that. We could get into a long discussion of why that's being dismantled in our country, but I think it's important to keep fighting the good fight to show people what the value is.
If somebody wants to be Michelle Massey when they grow up, how would they go about it?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I would recommend my path, although it has been fun. No, I relish everything about the things I have done, and I look back even in putting the photos together for this particular, about the museum. I think that you know, go for your passions, do things that you love to do, say yes, and continue just to be a good friends with people. I call my friends, I work with my friends. Todd is my friend, like I guess this is how you be Michelle. I don't know. I have a lot of fun in what I'm doing. I feel like that's what I want to teach my children.
You know,
Passion.
we only have 2 minutes left. And I don't see any questions that are coming in unless
We must be giving a lot of knowledge here.
I
I mean, I would like to say with, again, as you can probably tell, again, a non-traditional path in a sort of grassroots kind of marketing place, right? Because as I said,
sure.
I don't do media buys. I don't have a lot of budget put into print. I do have money that I use, but I'm using exposure. I'm using always the goal of editorial, getting people to write about us, getting people to come in and interview the curator and the director, et cetera, and having high, remarkable partners, you know, speak well of us. We have partnerships with Minnesota Orchestra, et cetera. I think that hopefully you can see that you don't have to have, you know, you can do this without all the big budget and all the bells and whistles, you know, and this is how you could build a brand for yourself as well.
You know, I have a number of mentees or people that are younger that ask me how to get into fields.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people that there's two definitions often is the idea of people who focus on their avocation, which is what they love, and their vocation, which is what they get paid money for.
Mm-hmm.
And those of us that are able to combine those things are the lucky people in the world. You know, our time is up, but I want to make the point that the thing to take away from this is that Michelle Massey is lucky because she's combined a number of the elements. And that's basically the lesson here is that
Yes.
what you can do is all of us have experiences and all of us choose experiences, choose friends, and we choose what we choose to do with our lives
Mm-hmm.
that become basic in who we become.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a model of somebody who helped to shape what she became. And if there's a lesson for all of us, I think it's the idea that maybe enjoying life here. On behalf of Michelle Massey, on behalf of myself, on behalf of the American Center in Moscow, I wish to thank everybody for being here today. We hoped that you would program as much as we did producing and doing it. So I want to thank you. Я надеюсь, это хороший день и, может быть, скоро.
До свидания.
Пока. Пока.
Пока.